So here's an interaction between New York City Mayor Eric Adams and Jeannie Dubno. I hope I'm saying that name right. An 84-year-old woman, a Holocaust survivor, who attended this meeting at City Hall to protest the Rent Guidelines Board's recent approval of a 6% rent increase for rent-stabilized units in New York City. And just so everybody knows, typical increases that are allowed by the Rent Guidelines Board typically do not exceed 3%. In fact, the norm is more between 1 and 2%, which is what the whole point of rent stabilization. So in New York City, you have actually about 40% of New York City units are rent stabilized units, which is part of, I would concede, what drives up the price of the non-rent stabilized units because supply is cut off. But rent stabilization is what allows working and at this point even middle class people to live in New York City. It would be a city full of rich people exclusively if you did not have that. I was lucky enough to get a rent stabilized
South America,
place.
you'd have the projects.
Yeah, of course.
You'd have the rich
and then the luxury
and the very
units.
poor.
Exactly. Russell is in a rent stabilized apartment right now. I was lucky enough to get a rent-stabilized apartment in the north side of Williamsburg for the last few years that I lived in the city. That was a great place and a great area. I loved it. But my rent would increase 1% per year. Like, it was very, very small. When I started at that apartment, my rent was $1,530, and I think when we left, it was like $1,575 because they can only increase it $15 per month every year. It was a 1% cap. So 6% is obviously pretty high. They're making up for the drop in real estate values when the pandemic hit, obviously. But this is high for a rent guidelines board to give the green light to a 6% hike. And so Jeannie, 84-year-old woman, a tenants' rights advocate of many years in New York, decided to voice her opposition to this to Eric Adams' face. Wait till you hear what his comeback was. Sorry, the volume on this is a bit low to start, but it'll get going. Okay, so the question was, Nassau County, Long Island, 0%. You spoke favorably of this 6% hike. Why is that? Just in case you had trouble hearing that, the volume is low on her end. She was not mic'd. She just got up and started talking.
Mr. Mayor, why are we having these horrible rent increases last year and this year? Okay, first, if you're going to ask a question, don't point at me and don't be disrespectful to me. I'm the mayor of this city. And treat me with the respect I deserve to be treated. I'm speaking to you as an adult.
I like how he starts by saying, treat me with the respect I would treat you. But then he's like, no, he changed it. Treat me with the respect I deserve to be treated. Come to think of it, I wouldn't respect you.
And treat me with the respect I deserve to be treated.
Hear that? Treat me with the respect I deserve to be treated. He starts saying, treat me with the respect I would give you. And then actually, no.
Well, I mean, Eric Adams is the monster that identity politics built. This is he is everything that's wrong with identity politics. He is
all right. Well, don't blow the lead because we haven't gotten to the identity politics portion yet. Let's let him break that. Yeah. Sorry. All right.
Respectful to me. I'm the mayor of this city. And treat me with the respect I deserve to be treated. I'm speaking to you as an adult. Don't stand in front like you treated someone that's on the plantation that you own. Give me the respect I deserve and engage in a conversation up here in Washington Heights. Treat me with the same level of respect I treat you. So don't be pointing at me. Don't be disrespectful to me. Speak with me as an adult because I'm a grown man. I walked into this room as a grown man, and I'm going to walk out of this room as a grown man. I answered your question. Go to the...
Well, first of all, he didn't answer her question.
No, he didn't.
That exchange. He said, don't point at me like I'm on a plantation and I'm someone that you own. Telling this to a Holocaust survivor, an 84-year-old tenants' rights advocate, asking, hey, why are we getting screwed by the Rent Guidelines Board, who under Bloomberg, they were a little bit more aggressive with rent increases than they were under de Blasio. But still, 6% is very high.
Froze
yeah,
the
he
rent
froze
for
it.
years.
Yeah, he froze
for years.
it
There
to
were zero increases.
Yep.
When he was running, when Adams was running, he wanted to raise it 9% on a 2-year lease. He wanted, I think, 5. The way it works is you sign a 1-year lease or you sign a 2-year lease. So, usually it'll be like 1 or 2%, 1% on the 1 year, maybe 2% or 3% on the 2-year. He wanted 5 and 9. I think they wound up at 4 and 6 or 3.5 and 6. I think it was definitely because that's what she's talking about, 6 on the 2-year.
6, yeah.
And now it comes up again for the Rent Guidelines Board to vote on every year. And I think they want to do 6 on top of the 6 that they just did. They want to raise it 6 again. Now, Eric Adams is a landlord himself. And, he ran that way. But as you could see here, Eric Adams is very, very comfortable manipulating woke signaling around his race to deflect criticism and to manipulate policy discussion. And certainly he's in very good company there. There was a story we were going to do a little while back about some of these consultants who work for some of the most horrible companies in the country doing this kind of a hustle. Well, the reason that we need to remove regulations from this corporation is because it hurts black and brown people, right? I mean, that's what they get paid to do, to put that sheen over it. And that's his whole career. So what? You made a slide.
Yeah. So this is from an article by Ross Elliott Barkin, June 2021. This is a quote from Eric Adams in that article explaining why rent stabilization and rent control was not a good thing necessarily to expand and protect because it may hurt black landlords. So the greatest wealth of black and brown people in this city is their property. So when we start making any decisions on small property owners, we need to factor that, because if we're not going to freeze mortgage payments for small property owners, if we're not going to roll back their mortgage payments, then we need to be careful. I realized just now that the reason I paused because I realized that was a stupid way of presenting that slide. It makes it sound like that's a quote from Ross Elliott Barkin. No, it was a it was a quote from his article. I just want to clarify that. That's my bad. I should not have presented it that way. That's Eric Adams' quote. That's quoted
now
from
he's
Ross
never coming
Elliott's
on the
article.
show.
Well, he asked Eric Adams these questions, and these are the answers that he gave to him.
Yes.
So I apologize for that. That was very sloppy on my part. But anyway, that is an Eric Adams quote. So yeah, there you go. The most cynical and sleazy manipulation of identity politics and woke signaling to create the opposite of what would be a desirable outcome or a desirable policy for the vast, vast, vast majority of black and brown people in New York City who are not landlords, but tenants.
Right. And also he tries to paint this picture of mom and pop landlords. The average number of units that building owners in New York hold are 893. There are very few small mom and pop landlords in the business. But rent stabilization only applies to buildings that have 6 or more units.
Right.
So when you're talking about those mom and pop people, they usually do not have more units than that.
Right.
This is mostly big players in this space that Adams is protecting, and this is what he does. Remember, Adams was a cop for 20 years. He was a Republican. He only became a Democrat to run in New York City, because with some notable exceptions, as a rule, it's very difficult to get elected here as a Republican. And post-Trump, I would argue that's pretty much impossible. You could not get elected in New York City as a Republican for the time being. This is not the Giuliani Clinton era anymore.
No, but they are capital loving. I mean, this is why you say.
Oh yeah.
It's
You just can't.
Right,
He's
you just
a
can't put the
Republican
R
for all
next
of
to your name.
That's it.
But you can be a pro-cop, pro-capital scumbag like Eric Adams. New York has elected these guys time and again. You know, New York City.
You just can't have the brand.
Right, you just can't have the brand.
But for all effects and purposes, he's a very Giuliani kind of a mayor.
Of course. New York should not even elect mayors anymore. They should just let the police chief be the mayor. They may as well, because that's how they elect mayors, right? Just save yourself the time, right? Whoever's at the top of the NYPD, that's the mayor. That's who you vote for time and again. Giuliani, Bloomberg, Adams, Bill de Blasio. I've talked about this on the show in the past. Bill de Blasio was elected in a fluke freak circumstance where you had Anthony Weiner running at the top of the pack. He had a scandal. So he was out. He didn't actually drop out. He stayed in, but he just completely imploded.
Because he got caught again, didn't he? He got caught again while
he had the other scandal. That was the comeback campaign that was then knocked down because another scandal came out, right? Running second to Weiner was not Bill de Blasio. It was Christine Quinn. But Quinn and Weiner hated each other. I mean, the animosity between those campaigns was palpable. You had literally volunteers from each campaign handing out sort of Oppo research literature in Washington Square Park. It's amazing. I've never seen volunteers hand out Oppo research on the other candidate. They always hand out, pro Weiner or pro Quinza, but no, absolutely hated each other. So there was no chance that any of Weiner's support would defect to Quinn. So they went to the third place guy. De Blasio was running third until like 3 weeks before the primary. So he was elected by accident, right? New York goes for establishment people, right? And tough on crime, moderate Republicans, independents in Michael Bloomberg's case, as he eventually became. Obviously, he ran.
But he ran as a Republican.
Right. But this is the type that they always fucking put in power. So at this point, just let the cops run the fucking city, I say. Easier, more efficient, more on brand. The hell with this.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had like a liberal mayor. I mean, even Koch wasn't liberal. Koch was kind of New York's Jimmy Carter. Like, he looks liberal in hindsight, but he was really the John the Baptist of the Giuliani era. He was the one who really started to beef up the police force and send them out to prepare the way for the gentrification, to start cracking heads in these neighborhoods. You can look it up. This is a forgotten bit of history today. I was there. The Tompkins Square Park police riots, because this is under Koch. You had a bunch of homeless people. You had a tent city, basically, in Tompkins Square Park, and they wanted to gentrify it. Back then, that neighborhood, the East Village, was all like anarchists and junkies. And to get them out, they created a curfew, and they told them, you need to be out by midnight. We're going to start locking the park at midnight. Coming up to midnight, the cops took out electrical tape. They covered their badges. And they just beat the shit out of everybody, man. You had people just running up Avenue A, running away from the cops. You can look this up right now. Tompkins Square Park police riot. It's completely forgotten today. And that was under Koch. And then when Giuliani came in, Koch had already prepared the way. The East Village gentrified in like 5 seconds. In 5 seconds, it went from anarchist bookshops to internet cafes.
Yeah. So there's a couple more pieces that we have to show on Adams. Well, actually, one more piece. And then, Russell, if you have something to share in response to this. But this was a year ago. This was over a year ago, which, talk about time flying. One Russell Dobular caught up to Eric Adams on the street and asked him about his support for solitary confinement. So here's some on-the-ground footage, if you will.
What's happening?
How are you,
How's
Mr. Mayor? Pretty good. Why do you support solitary confinement?
Do I?
That's what I've heard.
Are you a good reader?
I am a good reader. Tell me otherwise.
I want you to read the quote that I said over and over again. I do not support solitary confinement. And so what I want you to do, I want you to do research so you can get it right. And next time you see me, say, Eric, thank you for not supporting solitary confinement. Is that a deal?
All right, that's on the record.
Sound like a plan.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, you can.
All right, so you did do some research, did you not?
I did. Okay, so this is one of those things I wasn't at all prepared. I just saw Eric Adams on the street, and that was top of mind because there had been a lot of press coverage about how they had stopped solitary confinement at Rikers Island, and he ran on that. He ran on bringing back solitary confinement. But then he saw that he was getting pushback on it. So he changed his position in a very interesting way. As he said there, he doesn't support solitary confinement. What he supports is punitive segregation. Okay.
Oh.
So over the weekend, Adams reiterated his campaign claim that he opposes solitary confinement in jails and prisons, but he also openly endorses the use of punitive segregation, something he also doubled down on over the weekend. If you're wondering what the difference between solitary confinement and punitive segregation is, you might be onto something. That's because there isn't really a difference.
Right.
That's the point. Scott Heckinger, a civil rights attorney and the executive director of Zealous, emphasized on Twitter. Punitive segregation is solitary confinement, he tweeted over and over again. And if you don't take his word for it, take New York City's own word for it instead. Punitive segregation, PSEG, also known as solitary confinement, is a restrictive housing area where people are locked in their cells for 23 hours of the day as punishment for a violent offense. The city's website states. That's what it says on the city's website. So that is what that scumbag was saying to me there. That he doesn't look it up. Well, now we looked it up. Okay, so
he really is. I mean,
supports that policy under a different name.
I said this when he won. New York, a city famous around the world for its assholes, elected the biggest asshole they could find, the mayor of the city.
Yes. Right. Yes, that is a good way to put it. He is a grade A asshole. I can't really think of a bigger asshole that we've ever had as a mayor, although we've had a lot of assholes. That's very stiff competition. Like, who was the last mayor we had who was not an asshole? I guess David Dinkins. He was incompetent, but he wasn't an asshole.
Please clap.